Laundry Pier. Tonight we are going to walk along an old wooden pier where laundry and sails share the same salt breeze. A place where cloth and canvas hang in long, rippling lines above calm harbour water. As we move slowly from shore to the far end of the pier, we'll notice how every sheet, shirt, and sail responds to the wind, turning the whole harbour into a quiet gallery of fabric in motion. The pier starts at the edge of a small harbour town, where the stone quay gives way to weathered planks that stretch out over the water. Long lines of rope run the length of the pier, strung from tall poles and crossbeams, so that cloth can be hung high above the water and out toward the boats. From here, you can see rows of shirts, sheets, and towels shifting gently, all in different shades of white, cream, and faded colour. Some are work clothes, rough and sturdy, and some are soft cotton, thin enough that the light comes through them in pale silhouettes. Each piece has its own way of catching the wind, lifting slightly, then settling like slow breathing. Below, the harbour water is very calm, only small ripples moving along the pilings. When a breeze comes through, the cloth moves first, and only a moment later, the water shows faint rings where the air touches it. The smell here is a mixture of salt, soap, and sun-warmed wood. If you pause for a moment, all you need to do is look and listen. Closer in toward the town side of the pier, there is a tangle of lines that belong to the boats tied up along the pilings. Some of the lines hold laundry, and some hold sails. So the canvas and the clothing share the same space in the air. A small fishing boat has unfurled its mainsail along the pier line to dry. The thick canvas, patched in several places with slightly brighter cloth. The patches make a map of the sail's history. Each rough rectangle a memory of a tear or a storm. Beside it hangs a row of striped shirts, blue and white, then red and white, each one stretched by clothespins at the shoulders and hem. They sway in an easy rhythm as the wind comes and goes. When the breeze dies down, the shirts droop and the sail slackens. Thin folds forming along the canvas like shallow waves frozen in place. Then the air lifts again and everything fills, just a little, with a soft billow. The wooden poles creak faintly as the lines pull and relax. The sound is low and steady, like a quiet voice at the edge of hearing. As you walk farther along, the boards under your feet have the smoothness of many footsteps. The planks are silvery with age, their grain raised from years of sun and sea spray. Narrow gaps between them show thin lines of water moving below, a slow shifting mirror for the sky and the motion above. On either side of the pier, small boats are moored, their bows pointing in toward the walkway as if they were listening. Some have their sails partly raised and clipped to lines, drying after a day on the water. These sails are different shapes and sizes, some tall and narrow, some more like broad flags. A tan sail with darker seams flutters enough that you can see the stitching where each panel meets. Another is so white it almost blends with the sky, only the shadows of its folds making shapes you can follow. As the wind passes through, you can hear the soft slap of loose canvas against the mast, a gentle sound, more cloth than impact. Every now and then, a rope knocks against a wooden spar, a hollow knock that echoes just a little along the pier. All of it creates a simple pattern of sounds that repeats and calms. On the right side of the pier, near a cluster of larger boats, a woman is working on a folded sail laid out over a wooden trestle. Her name is Mara, and this is where she spends most evenings when the weather is fair. She has a small basket of tools at her feet, thick needles, spools of waxed thread, and a pair of sturdy scissors. The sail under her hands is off-white and heavy, its edge rolled double where a seam has started to fray. She guides the needle through the canvas with a firm, practiced motion, pulling the thread through and tightening it until the seam lies smooth. Every few stitches, she pauses to test the strength with her fingers, tugging gently at the joined fabric. The wind lifts the loose edge of the sail now and then, pressing it softly against her arm. She doesn't seem to mind. She just flattens it back down and continues her work. The smell of the waxed thread is faint but distinct, a little different from the scent of soap and salt around her. Above her, a line of smaller cloths, perhaps her own washing, dances in the breeze, so that as she sews, the shadows of shirts and towels drift slowly across the canvas. She looks up every so often, watching the boats rock and the sails move, then returns to her neat, careful stitches. Farther along, there is a section of the pier where the laundry lines dip lower, easier to reach from the wooden planks. Here, several large tubs are set out, and a few people stand or sit beside them, moving at a gentle, unhurried pace. The tubs are made of metal and wood, their rims damp and streaked with soap. A man in rolled-up trousers is rinsing a heavy wool blanket, dipping it into the water and lifting it again in slow, steady motions. Each time the blanket rises, it streams with clear water that splashes back into the tub with a soft, steady sound. Next to him, a younger person is wringing out a long strip of sailcloth, their hands twisting the fabric in opposite directions until the water runs out. They drape the strip over a line, the wet cloth hanging straight down at first, then slowly curving inward as the breeze catches it. Another tub holds pale cotton shirts, the soap bubbles on their surface reflecting small, distorted versions of the sky. The people working here talk little, their movements smooth and practiced, as if the rhythm of washing has become a quiet form of breathing. When they finish with a piece, they clip it to the line and watch for a moment as it joins the rows of fluttering fabric. Near the midpoint of the pier, children have claimed a small open space between the lines. Some of the lower ropes have smaller cloths hanging from them, bright scarves and shorter towels that move more quickly in the breeze. One child stands proudly in a faded yellow t-shirt that has been tied at the shoulders to look like a cape, the loose fabric trailing behind when they run. Another has taken a small square of blue cloth and hooked it over a stick, waving it back and forth like a flag. When the wind catches it just right, the cloth snaps into a perfect rectangle, then folds again as the gust softens. A third child sits cross-legged on the boards, carefully arranging clothespins into neat rows, only to push them over gently and line them up again. They occasionally look up when a particularly large sail billows, pointing and laughing as if the boats are secretly playing along. The adults nearby glance over with soft smiles, but do not interrupt. The sound of the children's footsteps on the boards is light and irregular, a quick pattern that weaves in and out of the slower movements of water and wind. Now and then, a dropped cloth floats down beside them, and they reach up to hand it back, stretching on tiptoe to return it to the line. Above the pier, birds make their own quiet circuits through the air. Gulls glide in from the open harbour, wings held steady as they ride the invisible paths of the wind. One lands on the top of a laundry pole and balances there, its feet gripping the weathered wood. The bird tilts its head, watching a corner of a sail that keeps lifting and settling, as if it is curious about how the cloth moves. Farther along, a smaller bird hops along the line itself, pausing between shirts, as if each space were a step in a ladder. When a breeze comes through, the cloth lifts, and the bird spreads its wings slightly to keep its balance, feathers ruffling just a little. Sometimes a gull passes close over a row of drying sheets, and the edge of a wing brushes the fabric, leaving a tiny tremor that runs along the cloth. The birds occasionally call to each other, but the sounds are short and sparse, echoes against the open sky and quiet water. Below them, reflections of wings and sails flicker together on the surface of the harbour. For a moment, it is hard to tell where the real shapes end and the mirrored shapes begin. As the afternoon slides toward evening, the light along the pier changes in slow, small ways. At first, the sun sits fairly high, and the cloth on the lines glows with a steady brightness. You can see the weave in some of the fabrics, the tiny crossed threads that hold everything together. As the sun lowers, the angles shift, and shadows grow longer and softer along the boards. Sheets that once looked pure white now seem tinged with gold or pale rose, depending on how they catch the light. The sails, thicker and heavier, show bold stripes of brightness and shadow, each fold laid out in clear relief. A breath of wind comes, and all of the hanging cloth moves at once, so that light and shadow shake in a gentle rolling wave. You can follow that motion from one end of the pier to the other, watching as it slowly settles again. Sometimes, when the air is still, a piece of cloth hangs perfectly motionless for several long seconds. Then a tiny stirring begins at one edge, and the fabric starts to move again, as if the wind were carefully waking it. The whole pier feels like a place that listens more than it speaks. At intervals along the pier, iron hooks and cleats are fastened into the boards, holding the ends of lines as securely as they hold the boats. Some of the lines are thick and rough, meant for canvas, while others are smooth and thinner, better suited to delicate cloth. You can see where repeated use has polished certain sections, the fibres darkened and slightly shiny from many hands. A cluster of spare clothespins is stored in a wooden crate near one post, the pins stacked neatly together. If the wind rises suddenly, a few of them rattle softly against one another, then fall still. Close by, a coiled length of spare rope rests against a post, its loops tight and even. Now and then, someone checks the knots, tightening one here, adjusting one there, making sure each sail and sheet is held safely. When they pull on a line, the pole gives a tiny shudder, sending a faint tremor down the length of hanging fabric. The rearranged folds settle into a new pattern, each piece of cloth quietly accepting its place. Nothing is done in a hurry here. Even the adjustments seem to share the harbour's slow pace. On the far side of the pier, where it extends deepest into the harbour, the air is just a little cooler. Here the boats are larger and the sails are taller, so the hanging canvas makes a narrow passageway of white and cream. You can walk between them, close enough to touch each sail with your fingertips. The fabric is surprisingly coarse against the skin, a texture built for endurance. In some places, the canvas is damp and chilly where the breeze has cooled it, while other patches have already warmed and dried, feeling almost smooth. When the wind flows down this corridor, the sails billow inward, then outward, like slow, heavy curtains. You can hear the deep rustle of canvas moving over canvas, and the occasional quiet snap when a loose edge catches the air. The smell here is strongly of rope, tar, and sea, with a faint trace of detergent from the clothes farther back along the pier. If you pause in the middle of this narrow lane and close your eyes, the world is reduced to the sound of slow-moving fabric and gentle water. Then you open them again and see the sky framed by two long walls of pale, breathing cloth. At the very end of the pier, a small hut stands on sturdy stilts above the water. This is where the pier's keeper tends to the lines and keeps track of which boats are in harbour. The hut is simple, with a door that stands open in the mild weather, and a single window looking back toward the town. Inside, you can see shelves with folded bundles of spare canvas, stacks of neatly rolled ropes, and several wooden boxes of clothespins sorted by size. A small table holds a ledger, a stub of pencil resting in the fold where the book lies open. On a hook by the door hangs a thick, faded apron, streaked with salt and soap. A narrow bench runs along one wall, draped with a half-mended length of linen, its edges turned over and pinned. The air in the hut is dry and smells of wood and sun-heated cloth. When the breeze comes through the doorway, it lifts the edge of the linen just a little, the fabric rising and falling as if it were breathing. From here, the keeper can see every line of laundry and every sail along the pier. All the small movements that say the wind is still gentle and the water is still calm. As the sky deepens, small lamps along the pier begin to glow one by one. They hang from posts and crossbeams, their glass sides a little fogged with age. The light they cast is soft and low, enough to show where the boards are and to turn the cloth on the lines into pale shapes against the dimming sky. Sheets that were bright white in the afternoon now look like gently shifting ghosts of themselves, each one catching just a little light along its creases. Sails become larger, darker silhouettes, edged with faint brightness where the lamps catch their curves. The water reflects these new lights, showing long, thin streaks that tremble slightly when the harbour moves. You can hear the muted splash of something small breaking the surface, and then silence again. The air cools just enough that the damp cloth holds a trace of chill when it brushes your hand. People move more slowly now, finishing the last tasks of folding or fastening. In the soft lamp glow, their figures are mostly outlines and quiet gestures. By now, some of the laundry is dry and has been taken down, folded into neat stacks on small wheeled carts. A pile of fresh sheets sits on one such cart, the fabric smooth and flat, edges aligned. When someone presses a hand down on the stack, it compresses slightly, with a faint whisper of cloth on cloth. Next to the sheets are folded shirts, arranged by size, their sleeves tucked carefully. A rolled sail leans against the rail nearby, ready to be hoisted back onto a mast in the morning. Its bulk is held tight by a webbing strap, the layers of canvas hidden but suggested by its thickness. The air around this area smells strongly of clean cotton and canvas mixed together. From time to time, someone lifts a stack of folded cloth, carries it a short distance, and sets it down again. The sound a soft, dull thump. No one rushes. There is enough time to put everything in order. With each piece put away, the pier grows just a little emptier and more peaceful. As you begin to walk slowly back toward the town, the pier feels different than when you first stepped onto it. The lines are still full in many places, but there are more gaps now, where earlier there were long, unbroken rows of fabric. The boards under your feet are cooler, having released the day's warmth into the air. You can feel the very slight give of the planks as they rest on their beams over the water. The sounds along the pier are fewer and softer. A distant murmur of voices, the occasional creak of wood, the constant, gentle lap of waves. A light gust moves through and finds the remaining cloth on the lines. A sheet lifts, a towel twists a little, a small sail flutters. Then the movement subsides and everything hangs still again. Above, The sky is taking on deeper shades, with only a few streaks of remaining colour near the horizon. The lamps along the pier make small circles of light on the boards, guiding your slow steps